The sound wasn't an alarm. It was something older, something her body recognized before her mind did. The St. Bernard's name was Birch, and he had been with the William family for 3 years before Sandra stopped dismissing what he was doing. She was a child psychologist. She thought this mattered. It would turn out that her professional knowledge was exactly what delayed her understanding. William and Sandra had Nora, who was 2 years and had recently learned to point at things as a method of requesting them. She pointed at Birch constantly. He bore this with the patience of an animal who had already decided that Nora was the most important thing in the building. The behavior started on a Friday. Nothing obvious. Birch began positioning himself between Nora and a specific area of the house. Not aggressively, not anxiously, simply with the calm, particular resolve of an animal executing a task that required no audience approval. He would stand there. He would wait. If Nora moved toward the area, he moved with her. If she reached for something, he was already there. Sandra moved him the first time. He returned before she'd crossed the room. She moved him the second time with greater deliberateness. He returned in under 4 minutes. By the third day, she'd begun consulting her child psychologist colleagues about canine resource guarding. The wrong question, arriving from the wrong framework, producing entirely wrong conclusions. Her expertise was the problem. She had a category for what she was observing. The category was incorrect. William was less certain. He had no professional framework to apply, which meant he was watching what was actually happening instead of watching for confirmation of what he already thought was happening. He mentioned it to his brother. His brother said he'd heard of something like this. William said he'd heard of it too. Neither of them said the thing out loud because it sounded like the kind of thing you didn't say until you had proof. On the 7th night, Sandra sat on the kitchen floor at 11 p.m. with her back against the refrigerator, watching Birch maintain his position near the area he'd been attending to all week. She had a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. She had her phone with a browser open to a veterinary behavior website she wasn't reading. She was watching the dog. He turned and looked at her once, directly, the kind of look that carries information. Then he turned back. 2 days later, the thing happened. The details are specific, which is why they matter. Birch began a behavior he had never exhibited in 3 years. He moved from his position and pressed himself against William's legs repeatedly, in the direction of the phone that was sitting on the counter. William reached for it. Birch continued pressing toward it. William called the number he needed to call. What the toxicologist found was button battery from remote control. The toxicologist explained the science afterward. Dogs can detect the specific metallic compound of lithium battery cells. The window between detectable and symptomatic, in this specific case, was the window in which Birch had been standing in exactly that spot, in exactly that position, for exactly that many days. In the esophagus, a button battery begins burning tissue within 2 hours, the toxicologist said. Sandra wrote it down. Not because she needed to, she would remember it without writing, but because she needed to do something with her hands in that moment. She had a category now. The category was, I had a professional framework that was wrong. The dog had no professional framework and was right. This is not an abstract thing. The family went through the math together later. The number of days, the progression of what had been building, the window they'd had. Birch had started attending to the situation before any instrument would have detected it, before any symptom would have been visible, before any human sense would have registered anything as wrong. He was working from a different data set. The family modified the house. They had the inspection. They followed the protocol. They thanked everyone they were supposed to thank. What they couldn't do was fully account for Birch's contribution in any of the official paperwork. There wasn't a field for it. There isn't a field for it. The toxicologist put early detection in the report. Early detection is accurate. It is also incomplete. Sandra sits differently on the kitchen floor now, differently than she sat in the beginning of this story. Lower, more settled, with Birch beside her instead of across the room from her. She had 20 years of professional training. She had a dog who'd been paying attention to things she didn't have instruments to measure. She doesn't say she was wrong. She says she was working with incomplete data. Birch has no opinion on the distinction. He is busy attending to Nora, who is 2 years and has recently learned that pointing at the dog works somewhat better than pointing at most other things. He is patient with her about it. He has always been patient. Has your dog ever done something that didn't make sense, until suddenly it did? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe so the next story finds you before the noise does. The follow-up appointment confirmed what the dog had detected first. The notes in the file said, "Early intervention, excellent prognosis." The dog received no mention in the clinical record. The dog has never required a clinical record. He already has his own system of documentation, filed in behavior, maintained nightly, requiring no signature.